Preview time.
Welcome to Look, Look and Look Again, Episode 8. Let's face it, we are all pessimists and love our societies a trifle despotic and dystopian. Whether we are battling zombies, thwarting alien menaces, or trying to overthrow some totalitarian regime, TV and film has proven that. In the 1970s, something more prescient was reflected in BBC TV's Survivors, which was screened from 1975 to 1977. If you're wondering why I'm talking like this, I've got one hell of a cold and I'm bunged up. Survivors is a premium example of what the golden era of television was all about. In current times we are told that we are in another golden age of TV, which quite frankly is bullshit. Another media lie in the hope our gullibility will make us imagine such. No era could equate to this, and as we have seen in Look, Look and Look Again, in some of our programs, most of the programming which we now refer to as cult happened in this time frame. I would be generous in saying that the golden age started in the mid-1960s and finished round about the early 1980s. Excuse me. Just clearing the phlegm. So we had 2 decades of unbridled treats, the like of which sadly we have never seen again. Survivors was a post-apocalyptic series where the question was asked, what the hell would become of society if in a lab somewhere a file of some unthinkable virus was inadvertently broken and something was unleashed, decimating the global population? How would we survive? What would happen to civilization when it collapses? And how would we recover? You see, Mother Nature created us, so she has the power to destroy us. And if this is so, then this could start in a laboratory somewhere, or simply naturally and organically, depending on how cruel she feels. Man will never tame nature and should only work with it. As to try and harness nature is trying to subdue something so powerful that can ultimately be ferocious and something we do at our peril. Mother Nature, she holds, like Anubis, the key to life and death. We should always respect where we come from, and to be unappreciative is in our own detriment to survival. The program Survivors encapsulates this theory, although the virus that is unleashed is something that mankind is responsible for, and the price that we pay for tampering with the DNA of germs. Over the duration of 3 series, Survivors followed 3 main protagonists who were a troika from different backgrounds, and through the series we witness how they survive against all odds as the planet is plunged into its second dark age. The 3 were Abby Grant, played by Carolyn Seymour. Remember her from Take 3 Girls we covered in Season 1 of Look, Look and Look Again. Jenny Richards, played by Lucy Fleming, and Greg Preston, played by none other than spaghetti splatter stalwart Ian McCulloch, 4 years before he ventured into cult past-pot boilers such as Zombie 2 or Zombie Flesh Eaters, Alien Contamination and Zombie Holocaust. Survivors was conceived by Terry Nation, automatically associated with his creation of the egregious pepperpots known as the Daleks. Unless you have been hiding under a rock on a galaxy far, far away, these malevolent little buggers need no introduction. Mr. Nation, though, is no one-trick pony, and although was the wunderkind of these shrill metallurgic menaces, he got his teeth on things televisual in the 1950s, creating material for famous celebrities of the time, such as Mr. Ted Ray, Mr. Peter Sellers, and Mr. Frankie, or Mrs. Howard. Mr. Nation did have a dalliance with science fiction, where in 1962 he had already written 2 scripts for the ITV anthology show Out of This World, which was Imposter by Philip K. Dick and Clifford D. Seamak's Immigrant, which regrettably are no longer available to view, as Out of This World was decimated in the archives due to that bloody junking policy that affect not only the BBC in this instance, but the ITV also. We can't really be 100% sure that Mr. Nation had planned to focus purely on the cult genre of programs, but there are definite leanings that way, as Mr. Nation contributed with his flair to such memorable slices of Golden Age cathode wonders, such as he's penned episodes for the Avengers, the Baron, and the Saint for ITC Enterprises. Nation, of course, wrote the Dalek serial The Dead Planet in 1964, which saw another group of survivors adjusting to devastation from a neutron war, as well as the lesser-known Keys of Marinus for the Doctor Who TV series. Terry Nation's contributions to the Doctor Who TV serial can clearly be seen echoed in the Survivor series that came after it on a few levels. One, the survivors trying to battle against the odds and the catastrophe that comes with the environment, post-apocalyptic, and also challenges from each other. And 2, the threat and result of plague, I suppose. Planet of the Daleks, 1973's gaudy outing for Pertwee, for John Pertwee's incarnation of the Doctor, featured a virus which the Daleks were going to use to wipe out a humanoid civilization. Then it was also, the theme was revisited again in the underrated, in my opinion, story called The Android Invasion in 1975, and again in the definitive Doctor Who serial Genesis of the Daleks, definitive by some, as I favour Inferno and Talons of Weng Chiang as triumphs of the series, but I digress. In these stories we witness biological warfare which would result in the destruction of the human race and the rotting of the pillars of society, bringing with it calamitous results across the planet. So the nods towards survivors is clearly evident, despite the show the apocalypse is accidental rather than deliberate in comparing the 2 series. Another nod towards the show can be found in the literary inspiration initially steeped in nuclear catastrophe, such as Neville Shute's On the Beach in 1959, and the dystopian apocalyptic scenarios from the mind of authors like J.G. Ballard, such as The Drowned World in 1962, for example. We can also look at John Christopher's The Death of Grass in 1956, which was published, which could also be regarded as an influence for the series. This novel also sees a pandemic cultured in a Chinese laboratory, which is echoed in the survivors' opening titles. To also further understand the show, we must also look at the socio-political happenings at the time, which may have added to the desperate backdrop, especially in 1975, when Survivors was first brought to the small screen. In the UK at the time, we saw some pretty disparaging stuff going on impacting society in general, which left it with upheavals such as strikes, power cuts, protests, hyperinflation were all popping up on a regular basis and making the news daily in some periods, as well as in Northern Ireland. This was the time of the Troubles, which had also peaked. Not to forget, of course, the global anxieties around, especially concerning, the Vietnam War. There was also areas of concern about impending nuclear Armageddon due to the Cold War and the surfacing of the nuclear deterrent mutually assured destruction, so utterly bleak and foreboding for most at this time. Conveniently, Survivors slotted into this melancholic milieu very neatly. On the upside, and let's be frank, after that we certainly need something, there was a resurgence in self-sufficiency, which was epitomised in the sitcom The Good Life, which was also shown in 1975. This was a huge influence at the time at the same time that the Survivors were shown, as people wanted to get back to nature in order to avoid the rat race and turn their backs on the negativities surrounding industrial progress. Ecological awareness was of primary concern, as well as the rise of communes at this time, and also retro technology, which was crude but effective. One of the main go-tos for all things bucolically autonomous was another novel by John and Sally Seymour, simply titled Self-Sufficiency. This was published in 1973. It promised readers the science and art of preserving and producing your own food. It was mooted that Terry Nation was also enthusiastic about this homespun lifestyle, and at his homestead he produced and grew his own, which is in sharp contrast to the flashy lifestyle of neckerchiefs and fast car, which he presented to the world. Nation may have been a closet hippie at heart, after all. Another key and important figure to the production of Survivors was Mr. Terence Dudley. Remember him? For those who have seen my Doomwatch documentary in season 1 of Look, Look and Look Again will know he was a producer of that show, so therefore we have a wealth of talent responsible from the concept, and no doubt this enabled the success of the show from its infancy. Initially, Terry Nation approached the BBC, and as he and Terence Dudley were no strangers to the organisation, and due to the concept being fresh, and we are talking about a time when the BBC were leaders and not followers, this secured commissioning. Dudley secured 3 directors to oversee 13 episodes in the first season, and casted 3 persons to take over the lead characters. Dudley wanted 3 people who weren't that well known, so that the famous faces, if they got leading actors, would not be a distraction from the hard-edged drama Dudley wanted. With everything secured, Survivors went straight into production and began filming. However, there were a few hurdles and not everything was plain sailing. A technician strike impaired and delayed work by several months. This, however, was fortuitous, as the time was utilised for a much-needed further setup of the programme. Without this time, things may not have been in place for filming. Another piece of providence was that the delay ensured filming took place in the winter months, and the chilly temperatures, muddy landscapes and bleak terrain ensured things were suitably and naturally anti-utopian. This also meant that when the first season wrapped up, it ended in the spring, bringing a soupçon of optimism in the finale. Unusually for the time in the 1970s, one of the main leads was that of a woman. The role of Abby Grant went to Carolyn Seymour, who we've already established that, who in fact picked Wanda Ventham, Benedict Cumberbatch's mother, to the post. Wanda Ventham, according to Terence Dudley, was a little too well fed for the role of a post-apocalyptic survivor. If Bentham had gotten the role, I feel it would have been just as good, as in my opinion, Bentham is a cult TV and film icon, and also a bloody good actress to boot. Lucy Fleming had trod the boards for a while, and one of her earliest appearances can be seen in another Terry Nation penned episode for the Avengers called Invasion of the Earthmen in 1967, which sports Tara King in a Harpo Marx wig. She also appeared in the film Privilege and Rasputin the Mad Monk, albeit in relatively insignificant part, and Lucy is also the niece of Ian Fleming, and no further information of who he is necessary. I'm sure you'll agree. And finally, of course, Ian McCulloch, who has an impressive CV spanning 4 decades, with appearances in films such as Cromwell, TV programmes such as Colditz, and I recently saw him play the part of a Randy Vicar in Crown Court in one of the episodes in the first series of it. He had just finished his role in the film The Ghoul in 1975 when he landed the plum role in Survivors. It was a role of Greg Breston that enabled Mr. McCulloch to embark on his Italian career, as when the show of Survivors was exported to Italy, it created a legion of adoring fans and proved highly popular. So popular that in fact that splatter director Lucio Fulci spotted this actor in the series, got in touch with the agent and asked him to take the lead in Zombie 2, or as it is known here, Zombie Flesh Eaters, thus springboarding Mr. McCulloch's career in Europe. Between the three of them, we can see that this is the essential triumvirate responsible for the success of the show, which carries it well over 3 seasons, albeit at the end there really is only Lucy Fleming's character, Jenny, that is a mainstay and is the only character to feature in the very first and very last episode of Survivor's run. The 3 characters are the mucilage, which holds the series together, providing the audience with an identity, so we can see aspects of ourselves in the roles that they play so very, very well. The character of Abby Grant, according to Terry Nation's character synopsis, has a life of considerable privilege pre-plague. After a short span as an interior designer and vocation in publishing, Abby Grant leads a life of suburban middle-class Shangri-La, spending her time with the odd hobby or entertaining hubby's business partners. Abby is a bit of a cliche in the beginning and represents the male ideal for a 1970s misogynistic Britain. However, it is Abby who suffers the most, as her life is ripped to shreds and turned completely upside down post-apocalypse, as this could be not further from the comfortable ideal in which she finds herself. We witness a complete transformation as someone who appears at first coiffured and cosseted becomes a cropped-haired combatant post-apocalypse. Seymour is wonderful in this role, and her fulgent theatrics ensures we are hooked on her journey from the get-go as we witness her evolution against a despotic world to become the leader of a new settlement of survivors. The character desperately seeks for her son, the only thing she may or may not have left. This hope of finding him keeps her alive. Jenny Richards, on the other hand, is a bit of a contrast, and Jenny epitomizes the free spirit mid-70s woman who personifies for the time modernity. If this was filmed in the 1960s, and Jenny would be swinging. Jenny is highly likable and down to earth, and her initial susceptibility endears her to the other characters who meet her along the way and make them highly protective of her. Jenny also evolves into a tenacious, defiant heroine who remains indefatigable to what is thrown in her direction, and her fortitude remains with an ability to remain emotionally stable for herself and for the other protagonists she is directly involved with during the first series, irrespective of what shit is flung in her direction. Greg Preston is an engineer and the hero of the piece, and throughout the series remains totally devoted to both Jenny and Abby, but Jenny especially, although having more of an amorous interest in Jenny, to be honest. But he still manages to hold on to his independence throughout, which safeguards him from all sorts of danger that he faces in this new world. Greg Preston is the backbone to the emerging community, and his debates and locking of horns with Abby on occasion makes for some riveting viewing. The first series is all about aftermath and genesis of death and rebirth, and due to the show's nature of relying and being part of nature itself, Survivors at times feels very pagan. There are also a host of regulars in Season 1 that form the community, and all are highly likeable and intriguing. Each individual that settles with Greg, Abby and Jenny all have a tale to tell, and their plight is revealed in some excellent stories in this first season. Two reoccurring characters are the cute actors of John Millen, played by Terence Dudley's son Stephen, and Lizzie Willoughby, played by Tanya Rhonda, the daughter of scriptwriter Jack. The success here is that both the young actors are not a right royal pain in the arse, as some children can be in television. Neither are they a hindrance to the plot's involvement. Their debut story, Gone to the Angels, is quite sad, as we learn both have been fending for themselves against all odds, and the images of the two trying to be self-sufficient to the point of dressing up in adults' clothes far too big for them to keep warm is equally adorable, as it is awful. Another endearing touch is that both of them begin to refer to Greg and Jenny as surrogate parents, which at first makes Greg and Jenny uncomfortable and reluctant, but this smacks of desperation, as children always need their mums and dads, although they are not as weak as the impression the child gives, for it is their childlike perspective that helps them get through the adversity, as they naively trivialize death in some of the stories, lending a somewhat unnerving trait to their spirit. Chris Tranchell became a regular as the character of Paul, who was vital to the community's agricultural development and sustainability, as well as adding a little bit of extra muscle alongside Ian McCulloch's character. Paul is an expert in this field of crop rotations and everything that seems to fit so well within this post-apocalypse period. You will of course recognise the actor Mr. Tranchell from many TV shows and from Doctor Who, as he appeared in 3 stories: The Massacre at St. Bartholomew's Eve in 1966, The Faceless Ones in 1967, and Invasion of Time in 1978, where he played Leela's squeeze called Andred. The character of Paul is the perfect hippie, adorned with his long, shaggy sheepskin coat and plucking away at his acoustic guitar, singing folk songs, and a lovely character too, which commands a bigger impact when he leaves the show in his swan song story. I defy anyone not to have a lump in their throat when watching this particular episode. Every community, or at least a community that runs successfully, does need a matriarch, and in Survivor Season 1, that role went to Emma Cohen, played by Hannah Maria Pravda. She also brings along with her a travelling companion called Wendy, played by Julie Newbert, and there again, these characters are both highly likeable. Another character that grows on you, but not at first because he comes over as quite priggish, is the character of Arthur Russell, who is a no-nonsense businessman, and of course accompanying him is his faithful secretary Charmian Wentworth, who at first struggle to offer anything much and have guilt around this area, but eventually come into their own as protectors of the commune when the leads are away, and proves that successful administration is vital to a community. Such is the structure of storytelling that everyone has a sense of purpose, and we really feel for the first community in this series, as though we sort of move from viewing the genesis of this community as a spectator, and somehow we gradually begin to feel part of it. Another addition to the community is that of the sympathetic character of Barney, played by John Hallett. Barney has learning disabilities, and for a 1970s drama and we are talking about a time where people with disabilities were predominantly institutionalized and ignored, he is treated with respect and characterization that really adds to the gravitas of this particular role. What happens to Barney is one of the best episodes of season 1, which is called Law and Order, and is most tragic and a real emotional tour de force. You have been warned. The images of the grave being dug for the accused, should a kangaroo court find them guilty, is very somber to watch. This episode, Law and Order, is excellent, and it is a total highlight that just is significant in showing that there are areas that is missing in the drama that we have today. The story is absolutely brilliant, and as I said, is one of the pinnacles and peaks of season 1. Vic Thatcher also appeared, and is another character that appeared all throughout season 1, who is coming to terms not only with the aftermath of social decay, but a disability on top of that too. In his story, Revenge, we not only learn the harrowing circumstances he became crippled, but how he deals with the perpetrator, as in this episode she finds Vic is far from dead, as the impression she was under when she left him. Oh dear. This is played with superb callousness by actress Myra Francis. There are some highlights of season 1, and these are many, believe me. Last of the main characters is that of Tom Price, a wretched down-and-out played by Talfrin Thomas, who has a wealth of thespian credibility on his CV. His character is one of extreme contrast, as Tom Price provides the merits of, much needed at times, comic and light relief, which is ultimately juxtaposed with some truly horrifyingly abysmal displays of the human condition at its most debased. What he does concerning Barney is so unsavoury, it can never really be forgiven of this character. As Crown Court, which we looked at in episode 2 of this season of Look, Look and Look Again, Survivors also delivers the goods in terms of guest appearances throughout the first series. As we saw, Myra Francis crops up, and we already mentioned that, and she can be seen along with such prestigious actors as Mr. Glyn Owen, Mr. Peter Jeffrey and Mr. George Baker, along with recognisable faces from television's golden age. These usually guest star in odd episodes, but one in particular to watch out for is the character of Charles Vaughan, played by Dennis Lill. His character runs a parallel community which would become of paramount importance to our survivors in Series 2. The part of Vaughan was initially offered to Gareth Thomas, who turned the role down, but came back as Roger Blake with a bang in Terry Nation's other triumph, Blake 7. One of the things I noticed in the first series is the distinct lack of intrusive incidental music, which is a modern plague in most programming, I feel, in this day and age. Thankfully, the lack of this, due to the fact the producers did not have enough time to edit it into the show, and it would have proven to be far too costly, it is one of the series' saving graces. Proving to achieve tension, all we need is commanding performances by the actors and robust to decent scripts, which do not require added embellishments. If there's one thing in modern TV that makes my shit itch, it is this necessity, now a prerequisite, to litter a drama or documentary with an intrusive soundtrack. I'm sure some people are dumb enough to warrant this emotional trigger, however I swear it is not necessary for the majority, and some credit should be given where it's due to the viewing public on this contentious issue. Season 1 of Survivors was broadcast on Wednesday nights in a 8:10 slot from the 16th of April 1975 to the 16th of July 1975. It received very little fanfare, but gained 7 million viewers on its first showing, and achieved that on average throughout. The BBC were very pleased with the results, and therefore Series 2 was commissioned. However, some changes were afoot for the production, and a few clashes meant a whole new approach was needed, cementing the format and a new direction in Survivors moving forward.
Greg?
Death. We have no choice.
No comments, please. Tom?
I can't.
Come on.
All right, banishment then.
Arthur?
Death.
Charmian?
Banishment.
Paul?
We have to.
Just your vote.
Death.
Emma? Banish. Jenny?
Me too.
Banishment.
Yes.
Vic?
Death.
4 and 4.
Which leaves you with the casting vote.
Come on!
Mm-hmm.